Welcome to the 8th Annual Authors and Innovators. I'm Larry Gennari. If you are here for the first time or for the first time in a long time, welcome back. Hopefully you can spend some time with us, not only hearing from our authors, but also enjoying the film and the refreshments downstairs. And of course, we've got a full day tomorrow as well. So let's get to it. There are so many folks to thank. This is our 8th year. And as we always say in so much of our marketing materials, great ideas drive business. And this year, our theme, we always try to have a theme, is the persuasive entrepreneur. Using storytelling and using the power of storytelling to inspire a team, to sell a company, to do a financing, to lead yourself in lots of different ways. And so we couldn't, of course, put this on with just one person. So from Gennari Aronson, I want to recognize Neil Aronson, and other Gennari Aronson team members. And for folks who don't know us, we are at galawpartners.com. You can learn more about us there. I also want to thank our participating sponsors who were so helpful. Greg Reidman from the Greater or Charles River Chamber. Greg, where are you? Here he is. Greg, tell us a little bit about the Chamber.
Thanks, Larry. My job is to do this really quickly so we can hear the program. My name is Greg Reidman with the Charles River Chamber. My job here tonight is to welcome you to Watertown, center of hub of innovation and technology, life sciences, and other things. We're really pleased to have this event back in Watertown tonight and to be working with you. If you're a member of the Chamber, raise your hand. We had a good turnout tonight. So thank you all for being here. And Larry, thanks to you and congratulations to you and your team for hosting.
Thanks so much, Greg. And our next big event, the next big Chamber event, Greg, let's tell them, November 1 is the Fall Chamber Breakfast. Week from tomorrow, be there or be very square. I also want to thank our other participating sponsor, Jake Ross from Build You Marketing. Jake is creative, probably the most active entrepreneur I think I've ever met, and I can say that. I've been doing this a while. Jake, welcome. Tell us a little bit about Build You Marketing.
Hey, everyone. Hey, everyone. Thank you for the awesome introduction, Larry. I just graduated Babson College about 4 months ago, started my company, Build You, from my dorm room. It's been 2.5 years. We have an amazing team, and we create LinkedIn content for founders and companies to help you raise money or get more clients. And it's been amazing to run the Gennari Aronson page. So if you've seen LinkedIn content, that was us.
Thank you, Jake. Build You Marketing. Also want to thank the good folks at LeaderBank who are probably downstairs. And our other sponsors, Needham & Company. I know Scott and Michael are here. So thank you, Needham & Company. Always, I think they sponsored us from the get-go. Always buying books that we can then share with other folks. And also the Katahdin Group. Sean is here somewhere. Sean is here. Katahdin Group is a leadership group, an amazing platform. And the website is what Sean? Katahdingroup.com. If folks can see it, if you picked up our flyer. Also want to thank Wellesley Books and also the Prison Book Program. For folks who know us, you know that we're quite passionate about entrepreneurs, and we are very excited to be supporting them as well as Project Entrepreneur at BC Law. And so take a look at that. It's outside. Every book that you buy can go to somebody who really needs that message and that book. So take a look at the Prison Book Program. Also want to encourage people to take a look at the What's Your Story table. We've got some great support and resources for folks to follow up and continue their story, both publicity, folks who do book publicity, but also some information from the brand new program at Boston College called BC Companions for successful leaders trying to figure out or trying to discern their next step. So please take a look at that as well. And lastly, our innovators downstairs, if you haven't spent time with them, please spend a bit of time with them after our talk. Harriet of Harlem, 1 Degree Outside, Fancy Pants Baking, End State, the Kendall Project, and tomorrow, I think, Right on Corp. So please spend some time with our innovators. They're amazing people, and they have spent a fair amount of time and thought trying to put together something that will engage you. So please spend some time with them. So now, on to some fun. Authors and innovators, we always try to find the best, the most interesting books every year, most years. And so one of the ones that I especially loved this year is called Job Moves. And this is a particularly timely book. Every year, an estimated billion people change jobs worldwide. And trying to figure out why, whether it's quiet quitting or, boy, those folks just don't want to work, is too facile an explanation. And so along comes Job Moves. I'm excited because for Ethan Bernstein and Michael Horn and Bob Moesta, this book isn't out till next month. So we got a surprise shipment, so we'll be able to do, you'll be able to purchase this book, and we'll do a book signing after. So Michael and Ethan, welcome. For folks who don't know them, and both of them have a real significant following and presence. Ethan is a professor at HBS in the Organizational Behavior Unit. He spent 5 years at Boston Consulting Group and 2 years in executive positions at the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And he is someone who's done a lot of thinking and studying. He has a JD and an MBA from Harvard, and I think a doctorate at this point as well. Michael Horn is the author of a number of books, from Reopen to Reinvent. He's also the author of Disrupting Class, Blended, Choosing College. He's the co-founder of the Clayton Christensen Institute, and he teaches at the Harvard Ed School, and he's co-host of the very entertaining podcast, Future You. So Ethan and Michael, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to talk a bit about this book. So for folks who want to know, what is this book all about? How does it connect to storytelling? This is based on a popular HBS class, and you did research with over 1,000 different professionals. What struck me as I was reading this is you actually create a narrative for people who are thinking about their career. And one of my favorite Steve Jobs quotes was, you can't connect the dots going forward, you can only connect them looking backwards. And it strikes me that you're doing some of that. So you start out with a different framing of why we take jobs. So Michael, I'll start with you. What's this jobs to be done concept, and how does it serve as a hook for much of the narrative?
Sure thing. And first, thank you so much for hosting us. So it's interesting. One of our third co-author, Bob Moesta, back in the 1990s with Clayton Christensen, the legendary Harvard Business School professor, came up with this jobs to be done idea. And the basic insight was that we do not buy products or services for their own sake. We buy them because we're trying to make progress in our lives. You know, it's sort of the famous quote, no one wants the quarter-inch drill, they just want the freaking hole itself, right? Theodore Levitt at Harvard said this, but a little bit more refined. And what we realized, and actually Ethan realized initially in 2009, was as he watched Bob do this interview about why someone had bought the product or service that they did, that you could apply this to people's choices around their career as well. In other words, it's not just that companies are hiring us, but that we, when we choose to work somewhere, are actually hiring that job or that company as well. You're making the choice of where to spend your time, use your talents, what money you'll get for it, what the benefits, all those things are, and you are hiring your job. And that gives you a sense of agency and decision-making and power and control that I think all too often we sort of say, no, it's employers that are hiring us, surely that can't be the case. But if you step back from it and look at behavior, you realize actually we have far more agency and power than you could ever imagine.
Particularly when you're intentional about it. Ethan, you talk in the book about pushes and pulls. Talk about that.
So recognizing that we're authors and innovators, our luminary author and innovator was Clay. And as a researcher, when I want to go collect data, I need a validated process for doing so. And he had a validated protocol that he developed with Bob for interviewing a customer about why they had purchased a product, why they'd hired that product for a job they had to do. And so what we did, we took that process and then we went and talked to now over 1,000 people about a job switch, a career switch that they made at some point and tried to understand exactly why it was that they did so. And when you first ask somebody, well, why'd you switch? They'll give you a terrible answer. Oh, it was random. Oh, this job came my way. I sent out a bunch of resumes. I got lucky and the probability odds were to my favor and I got this great job and there I am. And that's a very modest answer. We like giving modest answers to that question. We never settled for a modest answer. We became investigative journalists, really trying to go, and we went for 60 minutes or more just trying to understand exactly what the events were, what the sequence was that brought them to the point where they actually moved. And it could have been an internal move or an external move, but a move from one role to another. And we used that then, all of that data. I'm a qualitative researcher, so I coded the data with Bob and Michael. And we came up with what we found is the pushes and pulls, what pushed people away from what they were doing, what pulled them towards something new.
Oh.
And when the pushes and pulls were sufficiently aligned and powerful enough to overcome the anxiety of a new job and the habit of the present, which we like to live in, they moved. And so I think one of the things that we do in the book that's really helpful is we have 30 pushes and pulls that we think represent not everybody, but most of the job switches, most of the job moves.
I think
for one
most
of those
people who
reasons.
read this will say, oh, I never thought about it that way. Pushes are negative, pulls are positive. And maybe that's why I did it, because you probably found this a lot. When you ask people, they'd say, well, I wasn't really looking,
Yep.
but
Well-
I found this or it found me. And so we just decided to make that.
We decided to make the
That
switch, and
switch.
and we tell ourselves these stories without really interrogating. What was the timeline? What were the sets of events that fell in place? What were the dominoes that tipped, in essence, right? And there's causality behind that. And that's the fundamental insight, frankly, of Jobs to Be Done, is that when we sort of assume, oh, on average, people will do X thing, when they're in this situation, we can actually figure out causality. What were these pushes and pulls? And when we looked back on it, it was interesting. 14 pushes that are incredibly common among over 1,000 individuals, which is wild, and then 16 pulls, which is common among over 1,000 individuals that we studied. Again, also wild. But they tend to cluster with a few pushes and a few pulls coming together in what we call quests for progress.
I love that, because you frame it as there are different quests. And talk about that, because you break them down into about 4 different kind of categories. Anyone who's ever changed a job, whether it's a professional job or just a gig in high school, right? These seem to fit. So talk about what those are. First is get out. I just got to get out of here.
Well, I should say, truth be told, if I can I tell them the truth?
Sure, go for it.
Truth be
I'm
told,
not sure where you're going, but
I was very happy with 30. 14 and 16 seemed like a very, again, I'm the academic. The publisher and agent we need something less than 30, Ethan. So that's how we actually went back to the data and looked for patterns. So the way to think about these, just to be clear, is
Right.
there are patterns out there that exist more commonly than others. These are pulls on a map, north, south, east, west. They're not categories. It's not that everybody necessarily falls in one of these quests alone.
Right.
But one of the quests, then the quests fall in 2 dimensions. People, think of the what and the how. Either I like or I don't like what a current role does in terms of making use of the capabilities that I bring to the table. If you like it, that's because I really love being an actuary, and that's what I want to keep doing. We have several people in data like that. Those who want to reset that find themselves, maybe it was because of project work. That was certainly the case with me at BCG. I'm in the story. Michael forced me to write my own story in there, talking about stories, where you just did one thing, and then you did another, and then you did another, and all of a sudden you're an expert, and people come to you for that work, but that was never the capability you
Right.
intended to have utilized. And so those people want to reset. The other, that's the what. The how, but there's lots of different hows in the world today. Especially after the pandemic, people have lots of preferences they bring with themselves to the workplace. We're trying to manage all those preferences, and when those preferences don't align, either because I don't want to do the commute anymore, it's a waste of time, or I don't like working for the person I'm working for, the person I'm working for was switched, and now I don't feel like I have the same respect that I got once upon a time. All these reasons, those things drain my energy. And so as a result, I want to reset the way that I'm driven at work, the how that I'm managed. So if you want to reset both, those are get-outers. Some people are just trying to get out. Think of get out of jail. Get out.
Bad boss, bad situation, just gotta make a change.
Yeah, there's a dead end, right? The company's going nowhere. I can't see a path for myself. Get out. Frankly, these people want to leap before they look a lot of times.
Right.
Which is great if you're a hiring manager because you can pick these people up, although they don't always stay because they didn't think deliberately about where they were going when they went.
Okay, we're gonna get to employers.
All right,
I still want to talk a bit more about...
Let's do the
Yeah, let's
second
talk about
quest.
it.
So
Yeah.
Or do the fourth first.
we'll do the fourth. Okay, so if you want to build on both the what and the how, the capabilities, and then how it uses your energy, we call that the next steppers, the next step. So I'm ready, there's a personal career milestone in my life, I'm ready to take the next step for more responsibility, up the career ladder sometimes, progression within the company, but not always. There's one story we tell in the book of a lawyer, actually, and I think you probably have some empathy for this story with your own career story that you were telling me, who had been in a large corporate law firm in New York City, and at some point after he had his third kid, said, I'm getting out, and he went to a prosecutor's office. And to us, that looked like get out. And he was like, no. And in the interview, he's like arguing with us. The tape is amazing to listen back to. But he says, no, I had always decided I was going to go practice this kind of law. And now with the third kid, and that was going to be the
I
last
need to
one,
come back to it,
I was
right?
ready now to take that next step
Yeah.
to what I had always decided my calling was. So to Ethan's point, there's some get out there, but it was mostly about taking that next step in what he had always imagined his career path would be.
And being intentional about it. So
Being intentional. In that case, he really understood progress for him. Most of the time, we don't always have this great understanding, which is why we're getting you to tell your past story through the protocol that we teach you.
talk a little bit more about the other quests. Regaining control, regaining alignment, and how they might be different.
Do you want to do control or alignment? I'll do control. How about that?
You always were the
It's
control
me.
guy.
It's me, because it's my bio, right? Okay, so another quest is regain control, and this is where you're actually happy with what you're doing, so you want to build on that in your next role, but something is not right about how your time or energy is being used. You don't have control of how you are doing your work, and so you want to regain control. This was me, candidly, when my twin daughters were 1 year old. I had been executive director of the Clayton Christensen Institute that I had founded. And about a year in, I was like my wife was going back to work. I wanted to be more flexible. I wanted to be home with the kids and have oversight. And I was like, having a team, managing, this is not working for me anymore. But I love what I do. I like writing and focusing on education and getting to connect with great people like Gene. I need to regain control, though, of how I do my work.
Okay.
And the other off-dimensional, regain alignment, is about the what, not the how. So we talk a lot about purpose these days. We talk a lot about trying to figure out what it is that we want to do and have most impact doing, where we get respect. That could be off kilter because we're in a very small part of a large organization that doesn't appreciate what it is we bring as much as we'd like to be appreciated, so we just don't feel the respect we need to feel like our capabilities are being well used. Or it could be actually that life has changed around us. Maybe we've sold our company. Maybe if something has happened, and now we feel like we're just going through the motions. We're no longer fulfilling a purpose that we sought out to fulfill. We're filling somebody else's purpose because of the capabilities that are being drawn on. And as a result, we're actually developing capabilities every day. We're learning. We're just not learning on the curve we want to be learning on.
So quests for something else, something different. I want to talk about employers, because one of the things I want to make sure folks know is that this is a book for lots of different audiences. I want to talk about employers. So I saw this morning some data from intelligence.com that said for employers, 6 in 10 employers will fire millennials this year. The primary,
Just 6?
just 6. And the primary focus, yes, my wife and I were talking about this morning, saying, my goodness, we want to make sure that our college kids who will soon be in that workforce understand it. And 50% of those folks said it was about motivation. What do you make of something like that? And are you surprised by that, or does it tie into some of what you were hearing? Because this is about employers saying, these folks just don't want to work, they're not motivated. What do you make of a stat like that without knowing a whole lot more other than the stat, but you did talk to the people?
So this is why I was actually particularly excited to come, given the theme you'd set. Because I think to some extent this goes into the category of there's a story. There are two stories here. There's the employer story and the employee story, and those stories aren't being shared. People aren't having the conversation necessary to find a shared narrative. Instead, one person feels as though the other person is, so the employee thinks, oh, the employer doesn't actually care about my preferences. And the employer thinks, oh, I'm giving the employee all of this and they just keep asking for more. And part of that is because there's no common language and vocabulary is there for us to have a conversation between employee and employer, especially across generations, to be consistent that it's clear, okay, so what you're looking for is this and what I can provide is this, and there's a match there, or what you're looking for is X and what I'm able to provide is Y, and there isn't a match. And when there's no match, it makes sense to move. But when there's actually a match, it makes sense to stay. And there's so many possibilities for matching that don't get made, in my view, for what I see. Because we've said for 20 years plus, isn't it fantastic? You have the freedom to chart your own path. But we've given them no tools to do so. And as they try to do so, they've developed their own language that we don't completely understand. And as a result, we think that actually they're not motivated and they're just quiet quitting, and it's time to let them go.
What do we do with that, Michael? You have great checklists, and you're saying this is a this is a clarion call to employers to sort of read this. They've got some checklists. You folks actually argue that once you hire somebody, let's do some shadow job descriptions. Let's give those tools so that we can make this a successful, productive, rewarding career for the person we just hired.
Yeah, and that's right. If anyone has looked at a job description recently or written one,
I love this part.
you've probably seen that it's a laundry list of skills, credentials, requirements, and really sometimes they bear resemblance to the job that someone will actually do,
Right,
but oftentimes they don't.
They're a unicorn.
They're looking for a unicorn.
My goodness.
Right? And the reason for that is because, we take the old job description we had, the last time we looked for this job. We add a few more skills. We talk to a few other people in the office about what else we ought to add. We add those as well. We look at what our competitors are doing. We add a few more things that they've listed. And we basically say we're hunting for a unicorn. And unicorns don't actually exist. But we're not actually representing to people what will you actually do in practical terms on a day-to-day basis in this job, right? Instead, we get laundry lists like need to be a great communicator in agile environments where the skill set will do, it's gobbledygook. And our big argument is like, there's a reason these job descriptions exist, which with all due respect is for legal reasons. It's to help hire and fire, right? And that has a purpose. But if we can develop a shadow job description that actually is more of language of just what are the experiences on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis, what does someone actually do here in plain English, then we're going to actually create descriptions that, A, are much more helpful to the employers because we're much clearer about what we're hiring for, and are much clearer to the job seekers who are trying to find this quote-unquote elusive notion of fit, because they know what will I actually be doing, and are these the sorts of experiences that energize me and lean into the capabilities and are things that I know I can do, or I have the potential and desire to lean into and develop. And we think that's going to help matchmaking on both sides far, far better than what we have today.
What does that look like in a practical way for employers who say, well, I put all that in there because I want to make sure that I've captured every possible quality. But it also strikes me that companies are spending so much time focused on the customer experience that they're not thinking enough about the internal experience of the person who's sitting in front of them. What do you tell them other than you'll have Fridays off, you can be remote on Mondays, we'll find ways to align with the interests that you have outside of work. For that employer who's thinking about this, what else can I possibly do?
Well, I'll start off and then why don't you jump in? Because I think Ethan actually asks when he presents this to reunion classes at the Harvard Business School, how many of you are in fact doing what the job description said you would do?
Ah.
And what are the answers typically?
Oh, it's depressing.
It's like very low, right? So
Right.
so I think number one, like from a marketing perspective, or again, this comes from product development, right? The
Right.
jobs to be done theory. We are not in fact saying what the product, the job,
Yeah.
in fact is. And so that's the first break. And Ethan talked about how we don't have the language of employers to understand what the job seekers are really trying to accomplish. Well, we're not exactly giving them language that allows them to
sort
understand
it
what
out.
can I go
Right.
do in this role.
Right.
I think the second thing that I've really come to see since the book's written, we talk about, we're hunting for unicorns, and so it's no surprise that people dress themselves up as superheroes, right, by listing on their resume any possible skill that they've obtained and so forth and so on. And sort of both sides know that unicorns exist and both sides know that superheroes don't exist. And as a result, 80% of jobs are filled through a connection because I don't really trust what's coming through the filter. I think what's actually sort of given me pause since that we even wrote that is the problem's gotten worse. Because now we have AI
Right.
applying on your behalf to dozens and dozens of job descriptions, and AI is on the other side filtering and
Sorting it out.
So we have
Right.
AI dressing up as superheroes applying to AI looking for unicorns. And it's no wonder there's so much friction, I think, right now. What would you add?
It's full employment for AI. And all of this happening, and to get to your generational question, you mentioned millennials or Gen Z, consider, and I don't know who we have in the room, but consider if you were a person who was 20-something today.
Yep, let's go there. So that person is applying for their first, second job,
And
or
they-
in a job that they don't love for,
And they've grown
for
up,
any
Larry,
reason.
shopping through one of these. And these are designed to provide a customized user experience.
Right.
They're not used to going to a single store anymore that doesn't provide them with a customized experience, customized to them given their data. And then they show up at work and there's nothing customized about it. We don't have customized employee experiences, but that's what they expect. And it's not an unreasonable expectation. And unfortunately, though, they show up without the tools to help them achieve that customized. So think about all the data that we have in order to help provide that customized customer experience. They show up and they don't have a story to tell about who they are and what they've done and why they want to do what they want to do. They don't have a sense of the trade-offs that they're willing and not willing to make. And we encourage people to come up with 3 to 5 prototypes of a job before they enter in this process, so they can look at them, compare them, and figure out which trade-offs. Because it's not a book about the dream job. It's a book about trade-offs. If someone comes prepared with the story and the trade-offs and all these pieces, and they understand the pushes and pulls that brought them where they are, now you can have a customized employee experience conversation because they have the data to provide to the manager who can then see what they can do. Without that, you can't even start the conversation, which is why the conversation goes without being had, and now you're back at the end of the game.
Well, and I'll just say one other quick thing, and you'll add to this, but Ethan has done a lot of research looking at transparency in workplaces, when it works, when it doesn't, holacracy, and how you can craft roles right to match. And so you should talk about the research you did at Zappos, but we have a lot more ability, right, to fine-tune roles that get what we as the employer need accomplished and also help the individual make progress, I think.
I think the HBS professor just got cold called by his co-author. We'll pay for that later. So, without going into too much, we have tools actually, don't we? We have tools to structure work in much different ways today than we did 20 years ago. And yet, maybe it's because of the job description, maybe because of many other things, maybe because we don't actually know how to have the conversation, because this needs to be a social book and it's not always a social book. One of the things I have most trouble with by developing yourself as a leader, students, is actually getting them to go talk to people in their workplace about what it is they're trying to do to develop themselves, because you can't develop yourself in a silo. You just can't. It's not an isolated task. Maybe it's for any one of those reasons. We try to address much of that with the book.
I think you succeeded, because we've talked about students, we've talked about employers. You also direct this at mentors. So you're telling students who are just trying to find, and we're going to hear a lot more about this from some of our authors even tomorrow, but it's okay to test and try. And it's okay to talk with someone. In fact, it's really important to have somebody who gives a damn about you, and you have to do a 60-minute interview with someone. It's really important for young people to build their own team of advisors, for someone to whether they just started a business, first in business, going to a business, to find someone who hears them, who sees them, and who can help suss that out. Can you talk a little bit about your tips for mentors? Because you give them a map and you tell them this is how to do it. You've got to be thoughtful and intentional about this. These are really important questions. Luckily, because of the book, you don't have to do it from scratch.
So I'll start and you finish. I'll just start with the highest level. So we have an entire chapter that's really designed for the job seeker to be able to hand the book to the mentor and say, here's the process I would like you to take me through. And they do the interview and they follow the steps to do that interview. And that's important, and as is the quest conversation. Because you'll notice something about those 4 quests. If you think about it, if you have a get-outer and you give them advice as if they're a take-the-next-stepper, you've given bad advice as a mentor, unintentionally. But the advice is not the same. The world is actually designed pretty well for take-the-next-steppers and not necessarily designed well for get-outers. And it's even worse for regain control and regain alignment.
It's hard.
It's hard. And if the mentor doesn't know which you are because you don't know which you are, then what is the mentor left to do? Give very general advice, which turns out to be a 1 in 4 chance of being good.
Here's what I did. Right.
So we try to provide the materials to allow them to have the conversation, to begin the process of unearthing the data together, so they can go through that exploration and then ultimately provide better advice.
Yeah, and I guess what I would say, and this is fresh in my mind, we have this quote from Derek Thompson, the journalist at The Atlantic there, where he says, with 160 million people in the workforce and, like an incredibly diverse array of jobs, most of the career advice that you get out there is garbage.
It's pretty, yeah.
Most of it is sort of, just do what I did, and it's sort of autobiographical in nature. But to Ethan's point, it doesn't actually understand what quest someone is on. And my read, and I'll be super honest, like we have the 9 steps. My read is that the mentor, the biggest thing you can do is as you start to contextualize where someone is give them the right step at the right time that helps unlock that next step of progress. And it starts with understanding the story. So,
as I said, the book I think appeals to a lot of folks who are trying to figure out what's next. And it strikes me that this isn't just for employers, it isn't just for new employees, but it's for people who have accomplished something, who are now trying to figure out, do I sell my company? What do I do now? Or I'd kind of like to do some board work, whether that's nonprofit or actual board work. This is a book, this struck me as a book for them too. Can you give some thought around that context?
Yeah, well, at a high level, I'll just tell you a little bit about the data, because I think that's always interesting, and then I'll give you an actual answer. But of the 1,000 people 1,000 plus people we looked at, these are people ranging from, 24-year-olds in their second job ever, right, to, the 60-something-year-old who, to your point, is stepped out and is looking for, the board role, the gig work, whatever it might be, and everything in between. Blue collar, white collar, you name it. And so as a result, we have a lot of stories and things like that. But I actually want to tell this story through my father, if that's okay for a moment. Because he sold his company about a year and a half ago at this point. And he sort of assumed I'm going to step out of the workforce. And I was like, Dad, I'm looking at
that's not going to work.
While we're
right?
working, it's not going to work. Right, I can see what drives your energy on a daily basis.
Right.
I can see the capabilities you still want to do. And then I made a mistake and I said, what about board work? And then he threw it right back at me and said, these are the 5 reasons boards won't work for me. He was right.
It's pretty self-aware.
He was right when he understood, right? And then he was able to, over a few months of arm wrestling, he's back in a CEO role at a biotech company now, raising money. But he was able to arrive there through this because, again, my career advice was, now it's time for the board. A lot of people, that's
traditional
right.
path, right? Yeah.
But understanding where he was ultimately got them to a better answer.
I'll just add that this is why we say progression is not progress. Progression is what the world or the organization offers us, and progress is what people are trying to make. And sometimes it works. Take the next steppers, that's great, but it's not a line for the rest of us.
It's a great summary for the book. Talk a little bit about some of the people that you did interview. You said you had a wide range. This isn't for folks, just for folks who might have the luxury of finding a different position. There's plenty of people working 2 jobs that they're not, that they might not be happy with, or they're in a job because, frankly, it is a quote job, pays the rent. How is this book for them?
I mean, I think it's the same thing. Like, we're making trade-offs in our lives. Ethan talked about that. There's no perfect job, whether you're working 2, 3 jobs, or whether you're frankly, from outside appearances seem to have it all in the one. And helping you understand the trade-offs, not just in the work, but how it interacts with your life, is, I think, a critical piece to be super deliberate about. Because again, the money you take, how that interacts with the choices you make, I think we've given people a roadmap and a set of language. Certainly, for the firefighters in here, right? Like that are right. There's like, people frontline employees that I got to work with when I was at Guild Education, right? Like this, I think, will speak to them and help them figure out how to make those trade-offs, because often those individuals, at least from the experience I have with them, the biggest thing that they're facing is time poverty.
Right.
And how to juggle all of that is really, really hard. And it's easy to get into I'll just say yes and take that too, without a sense of where that's going to lead me or how well I'll do to be able to maybe at some point be in that, take the next step.
But also, even across the board, we saw surprising similarity, actually. In the current world, there's so much thin slicing of roles, whether it's people working 2 jobs, whether it's somebody doing a bunch of different side gigs. The portfolio is the job. And we'd like to believe that this is just, well, we don't necessarily believe, but some people like to believe this is a book you'd read when you're up for changing around that portfolio.
Right.
But Clay and Bob actually remind us from their original Jobs You've Done timeline that there's this phase called passive looking on every timeline. The vast majority of people are passively looking all of the time. And if you go to work and think about all the people on your team, recognize they are passively looking. And what you're trying to do is keep them from actively looking, whatever that event is that's going to take them
Right.
from passive looking to active looking.
Right.
And you could believe that you give them the perfect job and they would not be passive lookers. But trust me, you get a new job, just think about it. You gave a new job, you go to a party that night, you tell someone about this great new job you got. They say, oh, I got a new job too. And they tell you about it. You're like, oh, that sounds cool. You're already passively looking. We're all passive lookers because that's being human. And so in that sense, whether it's a piece of it or whether it's all of it, if you don't have a story, then every little shiny object starts to look interesting, and that's how you end up in a world in which the portfolio doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
Just one other really quick thought off this, because it reminds me, and again, we say it over and over again, job switching and figuring out what you want to do next is a social process. I think, and we often see this, that if you don't come from, if you're the first in your generation to go to college, or your parents weren't professionals or something like that, you're a first-gen professional, I think you don't realize how much of the world of work is who you know and the networking and so forth. And so for those individuals, I think the other thing that's really important that we give them is like a very prescriptive, almost like workbook-like, how you have the informational interview, how you get introduced to people who might find the opportunity, why that's important, and not leaving it up to chance. Because I think a lot of us, it's very opaque. Why did he get the job that I applied for, months before, online, months before, et cetera, right? And again, if the AI thing that I said earlier is true, of anything, this is going to become more so about who you know and the importance of personal connection. And so I think making that playbook both visible, but also giving people this is what you say in the interview, I think is really important.
I think there's such great tools in here for folks. It is the kind of book that you'll read a chapter and put it away, try to apply it.